This time on Watchers of Tomorrow, we go to town for festival.
Hello everybody, welcome to Watchers of Tomorrow, the weekly sci-fi critique, philosophy, whatever we feel like show. I am Gepwin, and I am joined as always by my good friend Dr. Isix.
Hi.
And this week we watched something.
Yes. It was a Star Trek episode.
It was on TV. It had the Star Trek characters in it, and I'm not sure I could tell you that much more.
Well, I think they were wearing some sort of period costumes of some sort. It looked like they were from the 1800s.
Yeah, they beamed down to a planet, and they didn't just show up in their uniforms.
Yeah.
Who would have thunk?
It's kind of weird. It's almost like they're in disguise or undercover or, I don't know, cosplaying.
Yeah, they didn't stay undercover for very long, but nah. So let me just... I realized a bit ago when I was doing some editing that I will sometimes go for a full 5 minutes before I say the title of an episode. So this is Return of the Archons.
Yes. The Archons seem like important people.
Yeah, it's nonsensical. I had to look it up because I knew Archons sounded familiar. They were a governing body in Athens, in ancient Greece. This episode has nothing to do with that.
Yeah, it's just a name that seemed kind of awesome, so they used it.
Yeah, it is a really cool name.
Yeah, it's I think there's maybe something from I don't know, StarCraft is involved there with called an Archon, perhaps.
Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure. And a bunch of things, basically.
Maybe that was Archon or something similar to that.
Now, this week's show is a story by Gene Roddenberry.
Oh my.
Yeah. I'm noticing every time we have a story by Gene Roddenberry, it makes no sense.
Yep.
At all.
There was someone who did the actual writing of the script, the teleplay, but Gene Roddenberry is behind this one from the core.
Yeah, and with the amount he rewrote stuff, apparently there was some controversy on this episode where he wasn't allowed full credit due to some kind of Writers Guild thing also. So I don't know how that works. That's some kind of weird intra-industry stuff that I'm not very well versed in.
I think this is our first opportunity to use this phrase here. If you're a Screenwriters Guild of America member, write the show. Let us know what's up.
Oh, we've got an innumerable amount of guest stars this week.
Oh, yes. A whole pile of them.
Yeah.
And some of them actually got the names for my notes here properly, and other ones I had to look up. One guy just called him Dad the entire time I was writing my notes out.
I know, the names are so immaterial. And so stupid. Oh, we have Harry Towns as Rager.
Yes.
Reger. Rager.
Yes. I believe he's the one I called Dad.
Yeah, he's the dad. We've got Torrin Thatcher as Marplon. Marplon.
That I don't remember who that one was, actually.
I don't think I have it in my notes, but they needed to be more careful in these names because at one point Rhaegar runs up and says, "It's the Archon, Marplon."
Marplon, Archon, it's the Marcon. Oh, what? Yes.
Yeah. And most of these other ones don't exactly show up very much.
Yeah, there's the girl, I think, Tula, was it?
Tula, played by Brioni Farrell. Brioni Farrell.
Yeah.
And
Captain Farrell.
She's basically the only other one that really shows up for very much. There's first and second lawgiver, played by Sid Haig. And then after that, they don't really show up enough. So...
Well, there's the one guy and the other dude and the guy that's kind of mean.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I guess there is unwikipedia'd unwikipediable Charles McCallandry as Landrieu.
Oh, yes.
The leader of this weird planet.
Macaulay? I don't know how to pronounce his name.
Yeah, no one does. And it's not on Wikipedia. I can't even get a guide. I do apologize. I realize that I read names wrong a lot. It's like this weird mix of a bad name memory and dyslexia hitting each other in a very awkward way. So I do apologize. It's not that I don't care about people's names. They're just the hardest thing in the world for me to pronounce.
No worries. I knew a guy in college who, sometime during the first month that we knew each other, he started calling me Pete for some reason. Now I'm not named Pete or Peter, so that was a little weird. But he made it into mnemonic because I eat a lot of pizza, and I enjoy it, and it was one of the things I was always there at the dining hall. So he called me Pizza Pete.
This is like the danger of mnemonic devices. Okay,
get stuck with a nickname.
let's try to actually talk about the episode before we hit the first 10 minutes here.
All right.
So, synopsis: we open on an old-timey street where two men in old-timey clothes are running. One of them falls, and we see that this is actually a pair of Starfleet officers, Sulu and another dude.
So we find out later his name is O'Neill.
Yes. Sulu calls for a beam out as they are surrounded by several robed men waving staves.
Yes, so obviously they're being stalked by wizards.
Yes, they are they're like red-robed wizards. I guess this might be from the Adventure Zone.
Slowly approaching, menacingly.
Sulu's companion decides to make a run for it, but Sulu stays still to be beamed up, but not before he is touched by one of the staffs that the weird dudes in robes are holding, and he gets this really kind of blissed out look before he's beamed up to the ship.
It's like poke, and then whoa, that was quite an experience, man.
When he arrives, Sulu is just blissed out on the universe.
Yes, yeah, he's like just so high on life, man, dude.
Yeah, he has no idea what's going on. He mentions paradise a few times, says the word Landrieu, and we cut to credits.
There's also some mention about Archons, but it's incomprehensible what he's talking about.
Yeah, it's like the worst written drug trip, basically.
Yep. Maybe explain some of this episode.
Captain's log: the Enterprise is in orbit around planet Beta 3, which is this is a weird naming convention we're using here.
Didn't we already run into a beta something or other planet at one point?
Maybe. So I guess that means that they're in the same star system. If it's beta 1, if it's beta whatever and beta 3. Yeah, wasn't there like a beta Tagni and something? They just love beta.
Well, if there's like, a beta and then another name, that actually, fits fairly well with, star naming conventions. But if it's just beta and that's it, then that seems to imply that that's a singular system there.
Hey, they are in search of a ship, the Archon, that disappeared here 100 years ago.
Cool.
Which, fine, but that's a long time to send a rescue party or a search party.
Yes. Well, maybe it's like, we lost them. We all just assume they're all dead because we didn't manage to get out that way for 20 years. And now it's like 80 years after that, and we only got around to like caring again.
Yep. Kirk, Spock, and McCoy and a bunch of randoms beam down to the planet because they need to search for their missing man, O'Neill.
Mm-hmm.
This time they are not in full uniforms, but are wearing sort of 18-something period clothing.
It's like they're trying to blend in or something. This is pretty weird.
Yeah, who knew?
Maybe there's some sort of, rule or law they're trying to follow to try to like be inconspicuous.
If there is, I'm sure it's not very important.
Yes.
The crew encounters several people who are all walking around very slowly and smiling inanely. They are approached by a man who greets them with "Joy to you, friends."
Oh, joy to you too, Gepwin.
He recognizes them as strangers and asks if they are there for the festival that starts in about 10 minutes.
Well, this seems like a delightful thing. Let's learn more about this festival.
This festival. It says that they'll need a place to stay and recommends a house around the corner. A young woman walks up. This is Tolia, and she is coincidentally the daughter of the man whose house they just told them to go to.
Oh, that's very useful. It's small town situation going on here. I think everything's going to be just swell.
Before they can get any more information, the clock strikes 6, and everyone just hits the purge.
Yeah, so just everyone just freaks out, and suddenly it's like pure chaos, and people are throwing, they're punching, they're grabbing each other, they're doing all sorts of unfortunate things to each other. It's just pure insanity.
They're making out, they're throwing rocks through windows. Mostly that's all we see.
Yeah.
There's a lot of making out.
Yes, and some of it's like done in silhouette, so it's like maybe trying to imply much more than that, but it's, nothing directly shown.
Yeah. Kirk and company run into the house where they find 3 older men.
Oh.
One of them, Hackham, is deeply suspicious of these new people who seem to not want to participate in the purge situation that they've got going on.
Well, Hackham, how about you just chill out, man? Those people don't want to get killed, right?
He keeps referring to something called lawbringers and how they're going to be upset. The other 2 men are more sympathetic, and one of them makes a joke about how the lawbringers should already know that these men are here because the lawbringers know all. And this upsets Hackham, who runs off.
Hackham seems just all sorts of rude in all of this here. In fact, I think I referenced him in my original notes as mean guy.
Yeah, Hackham has no chill.
Yes. It's like, oh, you insult the lawgivers? I'm going to go tell on you. Meh.
The crew attempts to warn Reger, who owns this house, that his daughter is in danger, but he just keeps saying that this is all the will of Landrieu.
Well, okay then. Can we go talk to Landrieu? He seems like he knows what's up.
Maybe. We hope so at some point, because so far none of this makes sense.
Yes.
The crew take the room that is being offered and hold up there for the night. The next day, the clock strikes 6 again, and everyone immediately goes from full-on making out throwing things to wandering around calmly.
Yeah, so they're back on the bliss again, apparently.
They hear crying outside, and it turns out to be Talia. She is up in a ripped dress and is very upset about something we never find out about.
I think she probably had a bad time at festival, honestly.
Yeah, that's what they seem to be implying, but it makes no sense.
Well, she also looks kind of battered and bruised, so she was probably at least hit a few times.
Yeah. McCoy takes her away and sedates her. She's now done with, and we can forget about her and the festival because they are never mentioned again for the rest of the episode.
And just sort of a introduction to the idea that there's something really weird going on this planet. That's about it.
Yeah. Reger keeps going on about Landrieu and how maybe the crew are more Archons. But before anyone can explain what in the world is going on, 2 of the men with robes and staves enter with Hackham.
Oh, hello, wizard friends. Are you here to send us on a quest?
Nope, they're here to shoot people with sticks.
Oh, okay.
Hackham points out the 3rd man, Tamar, and says that is the man who made fun of the lawgivers.
Oh no. Who cares?
Well, apparently someone does. The lawgiver points his staff at the man and it kills him.
Well, that's kind of rude.
They tell Kirk and company that they need to come with them to be absorbed. Kirk says no, and the lawgivers are confused.
Yes, the Hackham guy is like, he's like, they're not of the body.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about the body in this, and it's it's not written well. Spock thinks that Kirk planned saying no, and he asks how he knew that would be a useful defense.
Yes, because these lawgivers are just like completely flabbergasted.
Yeah, they're completely out of it. Kirk says everything he has seen suggests a compulsive involuntary stimulus effect, which I think are the 3 longest words we've ever heard out of Kirk.
Well, maybe he's picked up a thesaurus recently.
Yeah, so he basically is saying that everything he's seen suggests that there's some sort of direct control. So saying no to a request would confuse whatever's happening. But this doesn't explain the existence of a law-keeping enforcement police class.
Yeah.
If there's never any direct confrontation, why do you need a police-like entity?
Yes, if everything's a perfect system, why do you need your agents of control there?
Yeah, This
Mr.
makes no
Anderson.
sense at all. So Spock needs to stop giving Kirk credit for things.
Yes.
Kirk grabs one of the lawgiver's sticks and finds that it's just a hollow tube.
Well, it must be a magical hollow tube.
Yeah, they are just wizards. Rager tells them that they have to leave, and they run out past the still very confused lawbringers. Or givers. I can't remember which one it was now.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter. They're blue screened. It's fine.
On the way out, they pass all of the destruction from the night before, and they're greeted by a man that one of the crew members identifies as the man who attacked Rager's daughter. But Rager says that wasn't him, it was Landrieu, and hurries them away.
Oh, that's convenient.
Yeah, I suppose. Before they get very far, everyone on the street stops, picks up random weaponry that's lying around, and starts moving towards the group like slow zombie people.
I think the appropriate phrases here is stop hammer time.
They run away into an alley where they just happen to trip over O'Neill.
Oh, look at that. It's O'Neill.
Yeah, that was easy. Kirk orders them to bring him, even though Rager says that bringing him will let Landrieu find them.
Oh, well, that's unfortunate. Maybe we should, I don't know, just leave this planet and never come back.
Yeah, that could be an idea now that they've got everyone. They use their phasers to stun their way out of this alley and wind up in some old stone basement thing.
Yes, just suddenly we're at a castle site.
Once there, Rager explains that he is part of a resistance that operates in little cells of 3 people. The man who was killed was one, and Rager did not know who the other was, which is a weirdly ineffective group of 3.
So you're supposed to have 3 people like a resistance cell here, and that usually implies that you know more than one person. You have the one person on your left and one person on your right, and they might know other people, but you don't know those other people yourself.
Yeah, this is a kind of classical resistance organizational structure of you know 2 people and then they know 2 people, but you would still know 2 people.
Yes.
Maybe you don't know who the other guy's contact was. He'd know you and one other person, but you wouldn't necessarily consider that other person your group of 3. So it's just, I don't know, it's not described well.
Yeah. In fact, it's described in a kind of counterproductive fashion.
Yes, like everything to do with the resistance.
Yes.
Kirk asks about the Archons, and Rager explains that they resisted the will of Landrieu, and that he pulled them from the skies.
Oh. So they crashed and died. Cool.
Yeah. All of a sudden, Kirk's like, oh, dang, I still have a ship in orbit, and checks with the Enterprise. Scotty confirms that the ship is indeed under attack from heat rays from the planet, and that they are about to fall out of orbit. They just cannot keep an orbit on this show.
They're gonna crash in about 12 hours, and everyone's gonna die. Captain, back to you.
Yep. Thus, then, Landy appears.
Hi, Landrieu.
As they see through a sort of see-through projection.
A very crappy hologram.
Yeah, it's a really crummy hologram. He makes a speech about how Kirk and company are an infection that has come to destroy them, and then the sound starts and everyone just passes out.
Yeah, and Landrieu has robes and crazy hair, and he just kind of pontificates and is very slow about it.
Yeah, he actually looks a little bit like the collector, like the master dude from the Thor movie. Jeff Goldblum's character.
Oh, yeah. That guy.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember the exact name. Oh, yeah, that dude, yes.
They wake up in a prison that is just the basement set they were just in with some stuff moved around.
Yes.
So it was very confusing. I was like, why are they in the same place? Oh, they're not. Okay.
Well, they knocked him out, and then they locked the door, I guess.
Yeah. They could have just locked the door, but not as dramatic, I suppose.
Yeah. I think we should also point out that there's a captain's log at this point when Kirk's trapped in a prison cell, only just now waking up, and there was some communication issues to the ship. So it's like, when is he making this log?
Yeah, well, they're weirdly inconsistent with it, but it's like the captain's logs are always supposed to be like paperwork they filled in after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
even though some of them are recorded at the time and some of them aren't, and they're a little inconsistent with it at this point.
Yes, and this one seemed to be sort of like it was being done at the time as far as like the tense and such, but it's still like what?
Yeah, it's odd. Not a well-written episode.
Nope.
Kirk and Spock take stock of the situation. Their weapons are missing. Also, McCoy is missing. A lawbringer comes in soon with McCoy, who is now also all creepified.
Well, at least he's not going to be so racist anymore. So
I know. He didn't have any lines before, and now he's not racist. It's like they fixed him. Good job. Kirk can't even slap McCoy out of it. He tries.
Well, I guess you're not going to be mean anymore, but that was for all those times you were mean before, McCoy. I guess.
The lawbringer comes back and demands Kirk come with him. Kirk says no, but they've fixed this direct refusal issue they were having, and the lawbringer just says he's going to kill him.
Oh, I guess they've figured out their firmware upgrades.
Yeah. Kirk is taken to a room with more futuristic-looking architecture than anything we've seen thus far, where he is attached to a wall for absorption. A bald man, and identified as Marplon, enters and takes the controls. He turns on the machine, and we cut back to the prison where Spock is trying to reach McCoy through possibly a mind meld. It's unclear. But McCoy is apparently under too powerful of control for Spock to reach.
So, I guess it's back to slapping then. To get him out of the control? No, just to slap him.
A lawbringer takes Spock to the absorption chamber, where Kirk is now all blissed out on the universe.
Oh, sweet. Kirk's going to be nice too. Everything's turning up great.
Yeah, they're just all improved. Spock is attached to the wall, but Marplon explains that the machine is harmless because he is the secret third member of the resistance cell.
Dun, dun, dun.
He says that he arrived too late to save McCoy, but that Kirk and Spock are fine, but they just need to pretend to be all blissed.
So, Spock, it's your opportunity to act as anything other than a Vulcan. Uh-oh.
Back in prison, Kirk, Spock, Rhaegar, and Marplon start to plan an escape. Kirk wants to kill Landrieu. Spock asks about the Prime Directive, which would keep them from interfering with things. But Kirk says that only counts for cultures that they feel are developing okay.
I don't think that's true at all.
Well,
Kirk.
This is the thing. So, we're bringing a future knowledge of the Prime Directive as it's explained later on, and especially expanded on a lot in Next Generation and further out in the Star Trek series. This is the first time they've ever mentioned the Prime Directive of non-interference. So basically they say, what about this rule you've never heard of? And Kirk says, let's just ignore it.
Well, okay. We just made it up anyway, so I guess that, ignoring it's fine.
Yeah.
But it still sort of, implies that it's like an important thing. It's called the Prime Directive as opposed to Directive 12 or something like that, which kind of means it's one of those big things that you need to really make sure you know what you're doing when it comes to things involving it.
Also, he has this little thing of that applies to developing thriving cultures, and he's like, this doesn't look like one to me. It's like, well, you have interacted with this culture for all of 30 minutes at this point.
Yes.
So
Yep.
Quick to judge.
Yeah, a little bit. And I guess, once again, going back to the foreknowledge, there's still the, once you get past a certain level of technological capability, the constraints of the Prime Directive do break down. And so, Kirk, this would have been an opportunity to sort of talk about that. It's like, well, normally this would be the case, but they obviously have some sort of advanced technology, and thus the Prime Directive doesn't necessarily come into play. But they don't decide to world build that way. Decide to just sort of have this thing and then sort of ignore it.
Yeah, well, they haven't world built it at all. They just mention it, yes. And then it does nothing. So it arguably was pointless.
Exactly. You had an opportunity to make something awesome that would be paying off so much later, but you didn't do anything with it.
Yeah. While they plan, McCoy creepily keeps staring at them until he realizes that they aren't under the direct control and freaks out.
Oh no! McCoy's gone all mean again.
Kirk knocks him out, and Spock takes out the Lawbringers by punching them, which Kirk remarks on now as like, oh, that was what happened to your civilized combat. And considers it so important that I saw an interview with Shatner from like 20 years after this, where he again mentions that Spock hits someone in this scene.
Just a memorable moment, I guess.
Yeah, for some reason, Spock hitting someone in this one scene is so important that they're still raving about it like years later.
Well, maybe in universe, Spock actually tried to neck pinch McCoy while Kirk was out of the room, and it just didn't work or something like that. So he's like, "Nope, can't do the normal stuff. So I got to go full fist here." I'm going to pretend that's what happened.
Kirk asks Reger and Marplon, such a stupid name, to take him to wherever he can find Landrieu. But now that they can actually do things, the Resistance members don't want it anymore.
Yes.
They all kind of break down crying a little bit.
We do get a little bit more exposition about what Landrieu was up to and what's all going on, of course. But there's it's all sort of coached in this, well, this is why maybe we shouldn't be resisting sort of stuff.
Yeah. Kirk just tells them tough and has them take them to the audience chamber, where the projection of Landrieu appears again.
Ah, sweet, the hologram's back.
Kirk is not having any of this hologram junk and blasts a hole in the wall to reveal a really big computer.
Oh, who would have expected that there was a computer behind all of this?
Yeah. So, as it turns out, there was a dude named Landrieu. I'm sure just for his sins, I guess. He did something that saved the planet from war and other bad stuff happening about 6,000 years ago. He then programmed this computer in order to carry on his legacy after he died. But Kirk says that the computer may have all of Landrieu's knowledge, but it doesn't have his soul and is therefore bad.
It lacks wisdom, and therefore it is evil.
Well,
I guess.
He says wisdom a few times, but he also says soul. He's equating the two.
Yes.
In an interesting, weird way.
That doesn't necessarily follow Kirk, sorry.
Mm-hmm. The Landputer says that keeping everyone safe is its prime directive. But Kirk goes, you aren't keeping everyone safe. And the computer goes, oh no, help, 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 and explodes.
But you are a danger to everybody. You are harming the body. Oh, really? I'm going to suddenly believe you, person who just came from this, outer space to this planet and has been disrupting all my works. I guess I'll believe you and then follow your chain of logic, and now I'm dead. Yeah,
it wasn't even logic. Just but what if you're hurting people? It's like, oh, darn, I didn't think of that.
I'm going to think so hard about it, I'm going to implode.
It's a Babelfish situation. The Lawbringers come in and are really freaked out because for the first time in their lives, they are not under direct control from the computer. The Resistance is also freaking out because they just killed their planet's god leader. And Kirk goes, all right, you can take it from here.
Good luck, guys. Thumbs up. You're now a culture we can't interfere with anymore because you're developing, I guess.
Yep. Back on the ship, Kirk says that they left their sociologist there with a team to build the planet into a human culture.
Wait a moment. We're going to continue to violate the Prime Directive?
Yep.
Dang it.
Kirk gets a report from the sociologist who says there are now domestic disputes and 2 fights. It's not perfect, but it's human.
Dun, dun, dun.
Spock muses about how often humanity has longed for a peaceful world like that one. And Kirk says, yeah, but we never got it. Just lucky, I guess. Laugh track.
So.
The end. Good God.
Yep. This is a bit goofy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think before we go much further, I think I'm going to have to draw a very kind of obvious parallel to another bit of science fiction. So,
yes.
So you got a society that's run by this sophisticated computer system, right?
Yes.
Where everyone's kept in a state of maybe not like totally engaged experience, but a generally happy one, where they are all sort of linked together through this common bond of this computer system, right?
Yep.
And there's these lawgiver, these agents that are going around and trying to keep the peace whenever the random, very unlikely to possibly ever happen sort of rogue elements appear, and they have these sort of seemingly magical powers, right?
So you're thinking of the planet Amazonia women in Futurama, right?
Well, a little bit, but I was actually thinking about the Matrix. That's why I referenced Mr. Anderson earlier.
Yeah, there is a bit of a parallel.
And even when they're sort of leaving the house there, and everyone suddenly turns into an enemy, it's just like the Matrix, where anyone could be an agent. Oh no!
Yeah, so the main structural difference that you would hit is that while the Matrix is based off of self-realization as the ability to change your culture, this one relies on external agents.
Well, they were trying to have some sort of internal resistance, but it just wasn't working at all.
Well, they apparently never tried to do anything.
Yes. It was more like a social club, really.
Yeah, because they demonstrate that any sort of direct resistance is so confusing that it just shuts down the system for a little while. So obviously the resistance has never tried resisting.
Maybe they just don't know that that's an option.
Yeah.
Maybe just sort of a general, we resent the situation, but we don't know what to do about it.
You would sort of think they might have tried it once.
Maybe they're just not very creative people.
So here's the issue that I hit with trying to figure out the critique of this episode. There are 3 or 4 themes that this is trying to do something with, but they're very segmented, and none of them is actually explored in any kind of detail.
Yes. Well, we have this festival thing, sort of controlled violence as an outlet, I guess, but they don't really go into anything about that other than it's just a thing.
It happens once, and they never even mention it again.
Yep.
There's definitely a anti-communist propaganda layer happening here, with the overarching control of the state turning the citizens into cogs in a machine with no individuality or autonomy, which was a big kind of Cold War fear at the time this was made. But the weird, so it kind of starts as a critique of fascism, with everyone being controlled by this one overarching entity, and anyone who even passively resists, making a joke about it, is summarily executed.
A little harsh, but that's kind of fascism for you.
Yeah, but later, when Kirk figures out that it's run by a computer, his only actual critique of the system is that it's run by a computer.
Yeah, it's we're just going to go the old computers are evil standby. I get it.
Yeah, which
did we just do this?
We never get enough information about what the original Landrieu guy did. If he somehow created exactly this situation, then this would be a critique of his ideals being carried out for all eternity. But we never know. It's implied that the only thing that's wrong with the situation is that a computer is doing it. So we don't know if it's a critique of, was the computer taking something that he did and misinterpreting it into this fascist mind control state? Was this the state of things before, and the computer is just continuing it on? Because that, for all Kirk knows in this episode, this has been the state of affairs that Landrieu wanted. Yeah. So his only actual critique is that it's being carried out by a computer and not a flesh and blood person.
Which is a little ridiculous, because if this was actually the case, this was, Landrieu's original dream, Landrieu was kind of a dick.
Yes, very much so.
The alternative is that he had a completely different plan originally that was just sort of, hinted at something like this as in parts, but the computer sort of took it over and has maybe even like evolved it towards this as a steady state, this, preservation of the body. And, the logical conclusion is that, we have to have everything behave exactly this way to keep things exactly the same forever.
Yeah, which could, like, if they had actually expanded on that, that would be a very, very valid critique of Marxism as interpreted by Lenin and Stalin to create the Soviet Union.
Yeah. It's like, we're going to take your ideas and then we're going to basically chop out the bits that are inconvenient for us preserving power.
Yeah. Because this, like, I was doing a little reading and this would have been a fairly valid critique of Stalinism. Yeah. With the like hatred of individuality and children being raised by the state and the disillusionment of religions. But since they did very little with it, it's just some random boilerplate anti-communists 50s, 60s propagandizing.
Yeah. Which in some ways makes it seem kind of quaint, but it's still sort of, when you think about it, it's like, this doesn't make any damn sense.
Yeah. Doesn't make any sense at all. Like they're trying to do kind of a evil AI layer, which we could talk about AI stuff a little bit. I did some reading on that. There's definitely a probably unintentional colonialist message going in here.
Yeah, it's like, they've had this society that's totally bonkers, and we need to save them, and we need to install this much more human culture, and that's has to be the only way for them to survive, because obviously this crazy computer system is not going to work, right?
Yeah, in less than 48 hours, they destroy an entire governmental system and decide they need to install theirs.
Yep. So, we're just going to look at that, your entire government collapsed. Here, I have this one instead.
Yeah, and this is not only presented as good, but domestic abuse as a outcome of this is just like, well, there we go. Everything's normal now.
So what you're saying is that people hating each other is an improvement on the situation.
Yes.
You're not selling your message real well, guys. And again, given how much domestic abuse there is in Star Trek so far.
Yeah, it seems very core to their government, apparently.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Do you want to talk about the Chinese room?
I'm completely spaced on that. Which bit was that?
So this was a John Searle has this kind of idea that's kind of a antithesis to what we've talked about before with the Turing test.
The
Turing test, which we've talked about a bit previously, is if you can interact with a computer and not realize that you are interacting with a computer, you have basically created a true AI. Because the simulation of the interaction being so perfect is basically the thing itself.
So, go from Eliza to Eliza 3.0, and then you're like, oh, this is like a real person. I'm it's crazy.
Yeah. The Chinese room idea says if you like have a closed room and you put a slip of paper in it that has a question written in Chinese, and what comes out is an answer also written in Chinese, there must be a person inside the room who speaks Chinese and is answering your question. It stands to reason. But what's actually happening is there is a person inside the room who does not speak Chinese, but has a very carefully written rule book for what characters to write down in response to other characters.
So a cipher of the sorts.
Yeah, so the argument goes that this person can sit in this room forever doing this, following this set of instructions, but they will never be able to understand Chinese.
Yeah, I guess to a certain extent, you could be argued that at some level they might be able to pattern recognition their way into it, but they wouldn't be able to speak it or anything.
Well, this is the thing. They wouldn't be able to because they are completely divorced from context.
True.
says the kind of counter argument to this is, if this person memorized this rule book and then you put them in a real world situation, like working at a Chinese restaurant, they would begin to start to recognize the words from the context of what they were implied that they were meant to do.
Mm-hmm.
But completely divorced from external stimulus, just having this direct, like, I am receiving this input and I need to give this output, you are circumventing anything that would be the consciousness, and therefore the simulation can never be considered a true AI conscious entity.
So in other words, it doesn't matter if the person who's following the rule book is a computer or an actual person.
Yeah. And in the context of this analogy, the complex set of rules would just be whatever program the computer happens to be running, and the person would be the processor.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And you can get into that kind of argument with this because you have this Landrieu computer that is interacting, and it's really impossible for us to tell whether it's a true AI or not. And the way that Kirk interacts with it is implied that it's like this cold, heartless machine. The kind of interesting thing is that they don't seem to care whether it's conscious.
So no AI rights in this particular future. Okay, got it.
Because the thing is like dying, and it realizes that it is about to be destroyed, and it starts asking its creator for help.
Yeah, it's a distress. Maybe you could, like, I don't know, reassure it, and it's like, okay, we'll help you, but you need to have some changes around here.
But see, they don't actually go into anything. The minute they realize it's a computer, it's bad.
Yeah. Oh, this is something to be destroyed. Oh, our faces don't work anymore. We'll talk it to death. Yes.
Yeah. Which there's like two things in there. One, like, this is your general 50s, 60s, the machines are taking over, industrialization, automation, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
Also, it's this weird computers are badly made idea. They always have this weird thing in this style of science fiction and this way of talking about the computers that the second you give it any kind of logical contradiction at all, even the vague suggestion of one, it's going to explode.
It's a trope that shows up in other science fiction parallel to this, but seems to be a favorite of Star Trek for a certain degree here.
Yeah, and it is kind of this, people didn't have a very good idea of how computers functioned at this time. They were these big, complicated machines that took very specialized training to run, and they were huge. They were the size of warehouses, and they took just miles and miles and miles of magnetic tape to program.
Some of them got punch cards, and other ones got these tubes that keep breaking, and everyone's just going crazy. And then one has a magical switch that has, two options, magic and more magic. And it only has one wire connecting to something that doesn't even make sense. But if you flip the switch, it actually breaks down, and it's weird.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm struggling to wrap my head around this particular concept, and I recognize that's just my perspective coming from a very, very computer-based society. But I suppose the automation fear makes a certain amount of sense in this, that like you're automating away even your leadership, and it's going to do like dumb things.
Well, it's maybe it's a good implication for the democracy itself. I'm always a big fan of democracy, and having a computer that's immortal and who answers to no one other than this base core program, it means that your leadership is not able to be sufficiently questioned by your populace, and thus it does not have a check when it starts to break down or do something that's completely ridiculous. And because this whole system is built with this illusion that it's not a computer, it's some all-powerful being out there, it sort of puts extra layers in the way to sort of protect itself like that. And that's just sort of a several layers deep of I don't want to be held responsible for my actions.
Yeah, though we never really we can make the intuitive assumption that what is happening in this society is amoral, but we don't actually get enough information to examine the fact.
Mm-hmm.
There's certainly a suggestion of the breakdown of individual freedoms, which we consider a very kind of sacred right in America. Yes. So even the vague suggestion of this could be seen as like this is definitely an immoral action for this machine to be like, you know, mind controlling people. Even though at the time of this episode, the American government was experimenting with mind controlling its own population through LSD trials.
Wait, did somebody on the set there know something about what the experiments were going on with?
Probably not, but it was just kind of interesting to me that this was the same time period.
Yes. well, maybe it was just sort of, you know, someone, you know, watched this episode and was like, wait a moment, maybe we should be doing this.
So this gets into there's definitely some anti-spiritualist undertones happening here.
So anti-tech and anti-spiritualism. Oh my.
Yeah. Well, I believe that it's a communist fear critique, but it's very rooted in the imagery of 60s and 70s counterculture, which I know the 70s haven't happened yet at this point, but it carried through. So
new trends.
Just think about the way the main distinction that you have. You see two things that the people who are, you know, part of the body controlled by Landrieu are doing. One is being very blissed out and calm and overly friendly, which is very associated with the kind of hippie, free love, drugged out on the universe idea that was popularized around this time to delegitimize the countercultural liberal movement that was happening among young students. Yeah,
sort of, you know, an implication that this person's unserious. They're, you know, completely distracted and they're not connected with the world anymore. And thus, you really shouldn't pay any attention to what they're trying to say, right?
Yeah, which was actually very, very connected with anti-communist, anti-Marxist ideas, because a lot of countercultural stuff during the 60s was particularly inspired by Marxist ideologies. There was an entire kind of conspiracy theory going on with the Frankfurt School, which was a group of intellectuals who fled Germany during World War II, that kind of got mixed up in this idea that they were like planting Marxist ideas in young people in universities. And they mixed this in with a fear of kind of drug culture of the time, because, you know, the people who were on drugs were being influenced into this incorrect non-capitalist modality.
So the implication being that, you know, the drugs themselves are making them more, able to be manipulated, and thus this blissed out state of mind means they're susceptible to the evils of communism.
Yeah.
Oh no! It's not just because they've done their reading.
Well, I mean, I don't want to get too deep into it. I should mention out of completeness that there's definitely a very large anti-Semitic statement going on with that, because these were groups of intellectuals that were forced out of Germany because of Nazi ideologies.
Yes.
But the specific stuff that they're doing in this episode, while anything connected with that is going to have some anti-Semitic undertones, this particular one seems more concerned with the kind of spiritualist connectivity. There's like a certain set of spiritualist thinking that's fairly pervasive. I was actually just at a conference that was talking a lot about this from a psychological and therapeutic standpoint.
Yeah, you're sort of talking about this one mind sort of notion here.
A little, but it's not exactly one mind. Like they take it to a kind of absurdist extreme to make their argument in this episode, but the kind of one universe, one connected energy that people have described this as reaching this state in meditations and other things, and it's very commonly described in certain kinds of hallucinogenic drug trips, where the separation between your internal self and the external world breaks down. basically your perception and sense of awareness expands to the point that you no longer feel as a distinct entity separate from the rest of the universe.
So you become a continuity as opposed to a singular, discrete packet.
Yes, though personally I don't prescribe to the idea that any one of us is a singular entity.
Yes.
It's a multiplicity idea.
Thinking about this does remind me of an argument I made sort of mostly in jest many years ago about the quantum mechanics and the functions of the brain, like the actual like physical mechanisms that are going on. That in quantum theory there is a sort of you got the wave notion of particles, right?
Yes.
And so that means that your various particles in any system are not necessarily going to be fully localized to a single location unless they're being interacted with and their wave functions collapsing. So conceivably, you could argue that if you are in a position where you're not being actively observed, you are in some ways way beyond your what's you'd normally assume to be your physical body and things like that. And that's all that goes for your the components of your brain, all that sort of mechanisms, electrical impulses, everything is just is extended beyond that. So it's sort of a sort of that breakdown of isolation, except in a very quantum mechanical sense.
Interestingly, that's actually one of the ways that it was metaphorically described at this conference I was at.
Oh, sweet, I'm onto something.
I forget the exact wording right now, but they were talking about this idea of kind of disconnecting your conscious awareness and connecting with this sort of quantum plane as more of a metaphor than a direct physics reality. But
the trouble is when you're trying to not interact with something so you don't have your wave function collapse, your body is going to be interact with itself a lot, so it's really tricky.
That's true. Though you don't have to do it. Your inner continuity of awareness has to do it.
Yes.
But this is a very common idea in many spiritual traditions. There are quite a few Eastern traditions that still practice this idea. A lot of more modern, what we might consider kind of New Age philosophies deal with this idea of the connectivity. And it was very, very demonized during the 60s and 70s because it was hugely connected with the countercultural movement, which was under attack from mainstream government at the time to kind of hold up their 50s power structures.
Yes, and apparently also by Gene Roddenberry.
Yes, and a lot of this communist paranoia, anti-communist sentiment, and anti-Marxist ideas, while it was being fueled by what was happening in the Soviet Union under Stalin, which was horrific. Stalin was a horrible fascist dictator.
He was generally considered a bad guy.
Yeah, but the general Marxist ideas that were beginning to be accepted among the countercultural movement in the United States were not based in Stalin or Leninist ideas. They were just looking at Marxism as a critique of modern capitalism. And that was seen as dangerous to the establishment. And so a lot of the ideas associated with that, especially the drug culture and the spirituality, were highly fought against. So if you actually look at this episode, thinking about it as kind of this mind control idea, this connected one entity idea, seems to be this kind of absurdist extreme of a more grounded spiritual tradition that's existed for a very, very long time and keeps reoccurring. Even times when it's been suppressed, it always seems to come up again throughout human history, which suggests that there is some sort of innate experience that this is definitely speaking to. And the fact that it's being pitted against the idea of personal freedom, especially even this idea that conflict in and of itself is a sign of a healthy society.
conflict implies competition. Competition is what capitalism's about, and that's what we need, right?
Yeah. This idea that friendliness and cooperation are inherently off-putting to the extent that they can be a byword for immorality.
Yes.
The other thing that we see, they don't go into it very much, but the kind of festival thing, the only two things that we see them do are some minor vandalism and a lot of what's implied to be the precursors to sex. Yes. Which, again, free love and some minor, social vandalism, some like countercultural protesting and things of that nature were also very connected with the counterculture at the time.
It's like, if you're not paying attention, these dang hippies are gonna have a march and they're gonna break some stuff and you're gonna set your trash can on fire and then they're gonna have sex in the street next to it because it's warm.
Yeah.
And that's just the end of society. Oh, God.
And I'm definitely not trying to make some sort of argument for a mind-controlled dictatorial state, but it is very interesting to me that the way that they demonstrate that this is an immoral state of being is the fact that everyone seems very happy and blissed.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I don't know, I did not expect to go into a full-on critique of 60s capitalist power structures, so...
Oh, to a certain degree, you kind of hit up some of the stuff I was looking to talk about, too. So I think that really works. Like, I'm just going to let you do this. Well, I guess, this did get me thinking a little bit about, the notion of systems as, like governments as a system. And, there's a lot of comparisons between, the system of a government in this world and a body. And it's very, very directly sort of referenced there that the Landrieu is like the head, and the various people in it are various, sociological, biological functions in that body.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of like, well, this is all trying to be an interacting system. And then you go into the talk about, this is a sort of a vision of a fascist state of some sort. But this sort of idea that, it just sort of, that there's analogies going on, between a body and a government or any sort of, highly complex interacting system. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day what your base system, is, if it's, democracy, fascism, whatever, that there is going to be some sort of, series of interactions, and having a interesting way to sort of have an analogy going on there is actually kind of, curious and interesting. And it's, thought it was kind of, a little bit of, I'm trying not to say the word fun, but fascinating, I guess. That sort of, made this sort of a direct reference to that sort of thing here.
It's a very Star Trek word.
Yes.
It's kind of interesting that it's presented, and I even saw some interviews that were talking about this episode as a reaction to, communist fears. Mm-hmm. Because it's, aside from some propaganda stuff like we were talking about, it's basically a critique of any governmental system.
Yeah.
Because they are prioritizing the idea of full personal autonomy as the ultimate goal. Mm-hmm. Which any kind of interconnected system, any society at all, including like a family, even like the smallest unit you can have is going to have natural limits on personal freedom.
Indeed. It's part of that whole, give and take thing where my freedoms extend only so far, because if they go beyond this, they're going to be, intervening on yours, and then you are losing freedom accordingly. And so, so you have a government system put in place to sort of regulate that interaction, and therefore you don't have infinite freedom all the time.
Yeah, even with the body idea. So I was trying to do some research on the idea of like, the society versus the individual in a philosophical context, and I didn't find as much on that as I wanted, but I did stumble on this very interesting thing of Hegel's master and slave dialectic.
Can't say I'm familiar with that one either. You're pulling some cool ones out of me.
It's fairly interesting for this episode. I hesitated to talk about it until you brought up the body analogy, because if you look at this episode using this dialectic as a metaphor, you get into some problems when you factor in the fact that they have such a colonialist message. But the basic idea is Hegel was kind of standing as a counterpoint to the think therefore I am Descartesian philosophy. So Descartes' idea was all about, you know that your consciousness exists because you are in there and you are thinking about it. Therefore, it must be the de facto point where you can start from, as like, this is existence. Yeah. Hegel had this idea that a consciousness could only define its own existence as far as it was being observed by another consciousness.
I think you lose me, old Hegel, but keep going.
All right. Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit like the quantum thing you were just talking about. Yes. Something can only exist as far as it's observed. Mm-hmm. So a consciousness encounters another consciousness, and it is being observed by that consciousness, therefore proving its own existence. But another consciousness is not an entity that this consciousness can control, and it is therefore dangerous. So the natural instinct of the consciousness is to destroy the other. But if it destroys the other, it can no longer prove its own existence.
So you don't have anything about, well, I already proved my existence, but now I don't need that proof anymore. So I'm going to destroy you and going to preserve my former proof. Because,
No.
Yeah, maybe that all that was a demon or something like that. My past is all, fool's errand.
What he winds up with, and why this is called the master and slave dialectic, is that one of these consciousnesses will inevitably come to dominate the other. So one becomes the master consciousness and one becomes the slave consciousness.
Sort of building a hierarchy, but you're trying to use philosophy to suggest that it's inevitable.
Yeah. And then you kind of come out of this with some other things. There are a bunch of critiques of this dialectic, and the one that I was kind of struck by in reference to this, like, you have this very dominant kind of master consciousness in the Landrieu computer that is dominating all other consciousnesses on this planet in order to maintain its safety and control.
Yeah, very directly too.
And so when it's challenged by having entities there that are not under its direct control, it tries to dominate them.
It's tries to integrate it into the system, and once that seems to be failing, well, I guess we ought to destroy you because that's the only other option available to me.
Yeah, and I found this kind of interesting just from some critiques that were written about this idea, that once you have a group or individual, like once you have this master consciousness that defines its own existence by the domination of others, another entity that exists non-dominated is inherently threatening. Like, they don't have to do anything except exist as another entity that is not dominated by this consciousness to be a threat.
I guess that makes sense if you're going to assume it's going to necessarily be a threat.
Well, see, it's not like they aren't necessarily going to become a threat, but so much of your own identity and sense of self and worth has been put into dominating others. The fact that someone exists that is not dominating is now a threat to that identity.
Because, you've sort of defined yourself as this dynamic, and therefore, this thing that's not dominated is going to, try to dominate you.
Yeah, that's kind of the end point of this Hegel dialectic, is that the enslaved consciousness class is always going to eventually rise up and overtake the master.
But does that mean they're just going to replace the master with a new one?
Possibly. It doesn't get that far. Also, you have some very direct critiques of this, where like Hegel was a massive racist, so he didn't consider this as a actual like ideology, and he always made the assumption that the two starting entities would be on equal footing to begin with.
But in practice, that doesn't usually happen very often. Someone's like, well, I'm going to come up to this country and I have these firearms and they don't got firearms. Well, I guess I'm in charge now.
Yeah, which is why I think it fit in with your with the interest thing that you had with the system and the body analogy, but I hesitated to talk about it because it definitely has some very troubling implications once you mix in the kind of colonialist thing that they are doing in this episode, with the crew coming in and just taking over and replacing the system with one that they deem fit.
Yes. I guess going back to the body analogy, in some ways Landrieu's trying to be an immune system. It's and we go get to the climax of the episode where Kirk's arguing that you are damaging the body. It's almost like he's implying you are engaging in an autoimmune overreaction here, so you stop it. And it's like, well, I guess I'm just going to have no immune system then.
Yeah, I would have just liked them to demonstrate the damage.
Yes.
They definitely make an implication. If these people really are just completely controlled and enslaved and dominated, then there is like an inherent immorality to that action. But they never actually explain it beyond having that one festival thing that they don't go into. And
yeah, why did they have festival? What's the point of it?
Yeah, why did they have festival? Everyone at the time, when we see the festival, everyone seems to be enjoying themselves immensely. And
they're all giggly and, whoa, I'm going to throw things. Ah.
Yeah, and then afterward, you get the daughter crying in the hallway for, yeah, she looks like she's like in a ripped dress. She looks a little bruised up, and you have this like, yeah, something bad looks like it happened. But the last time we saw her, she was having a grand old time.
Yeah.
So what's going on?
Yeah, maybe Landrieu's control flips a weird way out this particular time, and everyone gets suddenly so much joy from being kind of terrible.
Yeah, see, this is the struggle. Like, we got to some interesting things with it, but nothing in this episode is written well enough to hold together, and it doesn't go into any of its themes at all. It doesn't explain anything to us in any kind of way. It's not like a show don't tell scenario. It's a show anything, please. Yeah. Like, I would settle for telling. You could have a big speech at the end that explained all of this, and I would have been much happier.
Yeah, it's like, and we need the exposition to tie it all together, and now everything makes sense.
Yeah,
great.
That would have been way better than what they did.
Yes. I will say that I was kind of amused by the window scene while at the house, where it's like, okay, you open the window and it's just darkness out there, not like a town, just blackness. Okay.
Yep. Fine. They didn't turn on any lights.
Not even like like some hint that there's like a world out there. Just sort of, you look out the window and you pretend you're looking at something, Kirk. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I guess they just couldn't afford that set. Well, we've waffled on for quite a while and gotten to some interesting places, but it's finally time for the galaxy's favorite game show!
Woo! Yay! So, on the Galaxy's favorite game show, we got some awards to hand out to people who have done amazing things. Maybe. We'll find out in just a moment. Gepin, I hope you're prepared for this.
Oh, yes.
You got it.
I have a healthy boatload of prizes for our wonderful contestants.
Oh, yes. It's good you got those, because we got some really important contestants here. So, first off is the Marks or Bust Revolutionary Award. It goes to Rhaegar. What's he win?
Rhaegar wins a frickin' spine. He doesn't do anything, and he starts crying the minute the revolution works. And I'm sorry, that's just a bad revolutionary. I want to have some sympathy for the guy who's a very bad revolutionary.
I think he's more on the bust option here. Ho-ho! The second award goes to, is the Fake Paradise Prison Award. That goes to Landrieu, because he has a paradise, and it's kind of imprisoning. So it's a little bit of a stretch from my usual go on this one, but I think it's appropriate. What does he win, Gepwin?
Landrieu wins a weird, bouncy weather balloon ball. When you want to keep people in a fake paradise prison, you need a big bouncy ball.
I've actually been watching a bit of The Prisoner recently. Good callback. The third award is the Talk It to Death award, which goes to Kirk for talking Landrieu to death, because he can do that. In fact, he's done that before. What does he win, Gepwin?
Kirk wins? I don't know, because none of this made any sense, and I can't with that one. Just, no, that didn't make any sense at all.
Maybe Kirk should win a script editor award that he can pass on to Gene for us.
Yeah.
Retroactively.
Yeah,
hopefully.
Send it on.
I think that's all our awards for today. Thank you very much, and congrats to all the winners. You're all super awesome, I think.
Congratulations to everyone, and thank you again for joining us on the Galaxy's favorite game show.
Yeah! Woo!
Oh, that got to some weird places, but
Hello, mate.
it's okay. We never have to watch that episode again.
Yay!
The next episode is one of the more famous ones.
Yes.
Spawned arguably the most famous Star Trek villain.
Mm-hmm. And he has quite the voice.
Yes, he does have quite the voice. Next week, we are going to be looking at Space Seed, which
space
introduces Ricardo Montalban as Khan Noonien Singh.
I think this is a fellow who you're going to be seeing more than once here.
Yes, at least twice. Depends on if you watch that other show that I'm forgetting now. Paradise something, Island something.
Paradise Island?
Is it Paradise Island? I'm not sure.
I think this is Paradise Island. Oh, let me check his IMDb here.
He hosted another show around this time period, and it's bugging me now.
Well, he was also, I think, in Freakazoid, right?
Probably, yeah. He was in a lot of stuff.
Yeah, Fantasy Island. That was in the 70s.
Okay, so I guess later he hosted Fantasy Island. That's what a lot of people started knowing him for later. Oh, he was in the Planet of the Apes. I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Neither did I.
All right, this is for next time, though. Yes. Ricardo Montalban, you just get lost. You get lost in his eyes.
There's just so much to appreciate about him.
Well, we're going to be distracted, so join us next week as we look at Space Seed on Watchers of Tomorrow.
Next time on Watchers of Tomorrow, we meet Superman from the 20th century. You have been listening to Watchers of Tomorrow, a podcast on science fiction media. Find and follow Watchers of Tomorrow on Podbean, YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, Spreader, Digital Podcast, and perhaps many more to come. If you enjoy our podcast, make sure to subscribe for more. And where possible, make sure to rate your experience or leave us a review. You may find Gepwin on youtube.com/Gepwin and Twitter @Gepwin. You may find me, Dr. Isix, on youtube.com/Dr. Isix and Twitter @IsixLP. Music is Waveform and Mori's Principle, both by DRKRN. You can also check out the Watchers of Tomorrow Discord channel. Make sure to share the experience with your friends, family, enemies, and alien overlords. If you feel you are suffering from transporter syndrome, please be aware that the next time you step off the transporter, that you, that is now, no longer exists.